Meanwhile, the United States is developing a strategy to address the growing Iraqi crisis. Yesterday, U.S. President Barack Obama announced plans to send 275 troops to Iraq, and the administration is exploring the possibility of working with Iran. Michael Brooks is a political analyst and journalist, and he joins us here in our New York studio. Michael, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Gosh, this thing just seems to be going from bad to worse, but it's been going bad for quite some time. Anyway, let's start with the announcement that the White House made yesterday that 275 troops will go in to help, they say, maintain security at the U.S. Embassy. So what do you make of that? And secondly, I want to slip in there also, is this the beginning of the slippery slopes of more boots on the ground there?
I do think that they really do want to avoid U.S. casualties at all costs. I think that that's connected with President Obama's legacy, such as it is with Iraq. There's political sensitivity after Benghazi and what that's kind of been exploited and turned into. So I think that's a very genuine concern. I don't think you're going to see types of mass troop deployments that some people are concerned about, but you could certainly see some more special forces, some more kind of people coming in to train, help shore up the Maliki government. But as President Obama himself said, you know, without a kind of solution to the broader context, that's sort of patchwork, and really that's what Iraq has been, unfortunately. It was a disaster and then a catastrophic occupation and then a bit of stability with the surge in the Sunni awakening, but fundamentally patchwork, and now it's coming apart. And if we don't get to the fundamental dynamics, we don't get to the fundamental dynamics.
Right, and I know you're not a member of the U.S. government nor representing them there, but the officials have got to be wondering what happened to that, what is it, $25 billion that was spent on training the Iraqi security forces.
Yeah, I mean, look, but obviously part of this goes back again to the fact that, you know, de-Baathification, disbanding the institutional life and reality of Iraq completely after the invasion. We're still dealing with that in a number of ways. Maliki also and that government have chosen to kind of play retributions against the Sunni. And that's why I think you're seeing some Sunnis supporting this group, this ISIS group, not because they share their agenda, but just because, look, we're Sunnis together. We would like to not be repressed, essentially. That could lead in many directions, many different types of conflicts within the Sunni space and Sunni community itself. There's a lot of potential fallout here. Yeah,
let's talk about this ISIS organization, this Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, or the Levant, depending on which way you want to talk about it. Talk a little bit about its composition, because this is sort of a hodgepodge of many different people that we call militants that each sort of have a different stake in this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is connected with al-Qaeda in Iraq, which obviously arose after the invasion. This is also coming from Syria and Islamist fighters in Syria. So it's a very organized, very ambitious group. They want to control a lot of space and a lot of territory. And they're really effective. But fundamentally, they're getting a lot of money from the Gulf and from the Saudis and from our allies. And that's a conversation that we're not having, and I think we're going to need to have if, again, we want to figure out how to kind of dry up their resources and, again, deal with the fundamental issues that are driving this.
And let's talk about that just a little bit. Of course, so many have been not only surprised by how quickly they were able to take these two major cities, and they're still marching forward and threatening to challenge Baghdad, but, you know, this is well organized, as you said, well funded, and these fighters have been fighting for a while, as you would call a proxy war in Syria for quite some time.
Yeah, this is absolutely, the broader dynamic is Iran and the Gulf states. And there is a Shia-Sunni proxy war, and they're deploying a number of very brutal means, like supporting a group like ISIS, like supporting Assad in a really incredibly brutal crackdown on his own people. And now that's spilled into Iraq. And that is the fundamental tension and the fundamental situation.
Let's talk just a little bit about the government, the Iraqi government's response to this insurgency. You know, we saw particularly in the early days of this first push that members of the security forces from the Iraqi government literally stripped off their uniforms, laid down their weapons, and just left. Now, as I understand it, there's this call for volunteers, and the security forces is made up more of sort of these untrained folk, or even militia, if you will, that even date back to previous clashes. So how does that then bode for this response?
I think what you're seeing is the reality of the situation, which is that these national institutions were never really built in a durable way. And the real stakes and the real political conflicts are the Shia, Sunni, political, cultural religious divisions, and it's being made formalized. There wasn't a strong commitment to the Iraqi army, but there might be a strong commitment to a militia, to a particular type of conflict. And I think, again, even in these places that ISIS was able to take, they wouldn't have just been able to take them if the local populations were not so dissatisfied with the central government.
Of course, a lot of politicians, a lot of analysts are doing, Monday morning armchair quarterbacking now, looking back to see how the U.S. should have pulled out, how much presence should have stayed there, what sort of training. But so looking back, of course, there's a lot of criticism on President Barack Obama and his policies. However, so much of this was already put into place by the previous president, by George W. Bush.
Well, I mean, it's a massive unforced error, and even using that kind of analogy is sort of tasteless for something as catastrophic as this. We did not need to be there at all to begin with, and how do you manage a really catastrophic situation? I think the best takeaway is, when people mention these concerns before the invasion, like Shia and Sunni, they would say that's pop psychology. Well, it's not. And if you want to build a successful political situation, you're going to need to deal with things that go far beyond military and even economic calculations.
I'm going to change the subject, and we don't really have time to explore it. But of course, now sort of this forced partnership between the U.S. and Iran. Does that just open up a can of worms that make things worse down the road?
I think there's possibilities here. I mean, we cooperated with them against the Taliban, and then we didn't build out from that. There's these negotiations, obviously, that are taking place in Geneva. Maybe this could help push them along. So there might be some benefits.
In Vienna, you mean about the nuclear program?
About the nuclear,
yes.
Between the P5+1 in Iran, exactly as you say. I think that it's possible that if we see more of our convergence of interests, maybe that will yield some benefits.
Yeah, we're certainly going to see. That's all we have time to talk about right now, but there's certainly a lot more to say. Michael Brooks, thank you so much.
Thank you.